Hey everyone, welcome to an SGI Drive for Gold recorded webinar. This one titled The Art of Brushing. So being recorded, not too much in the way of housekeeping. That I will have my contact information kind of at the end, and certainly the pros you can kind of watch at your own convenience, which is great. Obviously, there won't be any interaction live during this this webinar. However, happy to touch base with anyone that has questions or comments or anything like that. Would love to hear from you. So feel free to contact me, and my contact information and will be shown at the end there for sure. So the premise of this, there's been lots of talk about, obviously, the importance of technique in brushing, and lots of talk and debate about, how best to brush, trying to keep a rock straight, trying to make it curl, et cetera, et cetera. The thought with this little talk is, just trying to touch on all the other little things that I think sometimes go unnoticed, maybe aren't worked on or practiced or thought about as much. All the little things that brushers can, watch out for or potentially do, not only to make them better at the brushing, area, but really helping your team out overall. So we're going to try and touch on a number of points. Basically, what we'll do is we'll go over, I kind of divided it up into different topics, and then, under each topic, we'll have several points that we'll try and hit and go through basically. So, the main topics that we'll be running through today: managing shots, communication, learning the field of play, a little bit on timing, and then just briefly on physical management at the end as well. So, okay, so the managing shots, first of all, first point, knowing what the shot is and how you are approaching brushing the shot. So this point, I think, will come up multiple times throughout the little talk tonight. And basically what I'm getting at here is the importance of not only the skip, but I think the whole team, brushers very much included, in just knowing the game, learning the game, being aware and on top of what the shot is, what other options there may be available, what's good, what's bad, and ultimately, having the ability to kind of get the most or an approach to be able to get the most out of every throw. I think the best brushers that we see nowadays, they're very much kind of skipping the game as well, from the other end. They're into every shot. They're maybe mentally approving of every shot and the ice given, the lines and different things like that. And very much, are on the same page or get to the same page basically with respect to kind of the strategy and what's going on and what needs to happen to be able to manage those shots. So next point here under managing shots, picking reference points on the sheet to help manage. So again, I think something that we can learn at a younger age, and I think something again that the best brushers are very good at doing. And again, what I'm meaning by this, when your two brushes are down at the other end, maybe you're coming around to the draws around a center guard, or it's a hit, where you have to be pretty precise, things of that nature. Just using lines or logos in the sheet. Obviously, logos are quite prevalent in arenas, but also becoming more so in clubs as well. Center lines, 4-foot lines, anything that kind of can be used as a reference point. And what you can, example of a draw, if the center guard is just off the center line, you have to be tight to it. you know, at that depth when you're brushing, you know, the edge of the rock might be wanting to, or in a best case scenario, just touching the center line. And so it really gives the brushers kind of that heads up, the ability to kind of maybe catch things even before the line caller does, and be more, you know, proactive, I guess, brushers in a versus kind of reactive, or waiting for a call as well. So little things like that, you know, might be where you want the rock to end up, or it might be like our example, it might be more of a line situation, where you need it to cross or be at a certain point to kind of make a shot, draw or hit, really, for that matter. So I think one thing that, you know, we probably don't do enough, and I think a great idea for coaches out there, I guess, to incorporate into practices is, you know, playing a scenario, playing an end or two, and basically having the brushers, you know, kind of manage the shots completely on their own. So no input from a line caller, maybe no input from the thrower either. Strictly trying to make the shots. Obviously, you know, in most cases they're in charge of weight, but certainly can, you know, using these little tricks, get better at kind of managing lines and whatnot as well. So I think that's a good way to practice getting better at this point, basically, is to run the occasional practice like that to kind of force them to really step up the managing part of things. Okay, the next point we'll talk about, knowing how much brushing planned to make a shot. So, you know, this really goes back to the discussion or mindset of how best to make a shot, versus, you know, how to acceptably miss a shot, in a sense, right? So, you know, brushing, in my opinion, kind of gives us a built-in kind of buffer zone, and I think, you know, I think we should be using that in our approach of how we want to go about trying to make every shot, really. You know, there might be some shots or certain shots that, you know, you want the brushers more involved, or need them more involved to kind of, you know, give yourself the best chance of getting something good out of a shot, and other ones where, you know, you want them on and off and things of that nature, right? So just kind of more of a mindset thing. But I think, you know, if you talk in those terms, and the brushers kind of know, you know, at least what's expected, whether it happens every time or not. Obviously, that's not always the case. That's sport, but, you know, I think if the plan is there, they know what to expect. Helps them, helps the thrower. You know, I think it's easier to kind of, you know, dial some of that stuff in when you're thinking in those terms. And then the reference always is how to best make the shot too. There's no discussion or a cop out, I guess, of how we can miss it and it's still okay, basically. So. Okay, next point I want to touch on. This is pretty important as well. First 5 to 10 feet. So really, this is the time and place that, you know, I guess managing the shot begins. And I think I would say this, that not many shots are made in this zone, but I would say definitely a whole bunch are missed because of what happens here. So, you know, and that may not always be missed because of the way it was brushed, but I think certainly missed because of the start of, you know, mismanagement of the shot as a whole, whether that be panic or what have you. But really, this is the point in time where, you know, you want to kind of let the rock kind of travel a little bit, see what's exactly going on, and basically start the management of the shot, you know, in a way that's going to carry on and be effective for you, which we'll talk about a little bit more as we go here. But Yeah, it is. It's just, I think it's an important one. Obviously, there's cases where it's really obvious, and those will happen when it's, the throw maybe isn't, quite in the ballpark, whether it be line or a little bit of weight or both. But the throws that are kind of in the ballpark in that sense, you know, we want to see them kind of started off managing correctly, with potentially a little bit of thrower input, the brushers having a confirm with each other, and then away you go with the communication and so on and so forth. So I think really important to not ruin this distance or this first part of throws as much as you possibly can. Okay, so next point we'll talk about here under still managing shots. Learn when you need to brush or not, I guess, with respect to reading the throw. So I think this is important for both weight. There could be, adds in weight or subtracting weight on the release part of things, depending on, how the thrower thinks the initial kick speed was, and so on and so forth, right? But also line, again, using reference points or going back to that point, center line can be a good reference there as well, or just a good overhead view. The brushers are typically, right on top of the thrower, and so you have a really good vantage point of kind of what happens during that release, whether it's affected from a line standpoint, or a weight standpoint, basically. So, and I think also too, even past that point, as the rock is traveling further down the ice, the brushers may be able to pick up the break points, in some cases quicker than the line callers, because again, you're seeing it, you're right over top of things, right? So it's again, yeah, just learning to read that throw, and being, more proactive. Okay, judgment. So how long can you wait? When must you brush? So I'll give you an example of this one. This would be I think of a situation, and there'd be several examples, but I think of a situation where, a draw is being thrown, you're maybe drawing to the center, but you've got to wait on the line. Maybe it's, the rock's got to get off a corner guard before kind of getting through and burying around a center guard, for instance. So, just in general judgment terms, knowing as a brusher, knowing that, weight is first for you. Obviously you can have line input, and as we're discussing, should have line input, or in the back of your mind anyway, waiting for confirmation from the line caller. But just again, knowing, I guess, when, you have to sweep, or the shot may be missed anyway from a weight standpoint. So just being cognizant of those little things. You see those shots quite often, especially with the 5 rock rule, which we've been playing for quite a while now, right? So not an uncommon situation. There'd be other situations of this too, whether it's a little tap and you've got to move a rock. How long can you wait for the line before you might as well sweep it, because you're going to miss it for weight anyway? Those types of scenarios. And last one under managing shots, house awareness when finishing shots off. So this is just, again, kind of sticking with it right to the end, whether it be, hit and rolls to get a rock fully buried, brushing rocks that, maybe you've got some jamming happening and you've got to stay alert and get an opposition rock out of the house. Or even, a common one again I see is the shots, right in the ballpark, and basically just making sure that you don't set up an easy, double in the house, or cross house double, or lining up an angle that, all of a sudden isn't good, but could have been avoided just with the awareness of where you need to be with that rock, right? So yeah, just again, kind of that last little bit of finishing the shots off, which I think is obviously very important if you've done everything well up into that point, for sure. So just some things under managing shots to consider. I think some important points that once improved upon can really help things off right away from a brusher standpoint and obviously team standpoint. Okay, so the next little section we'll talk about falls under communication, and some points here to discuss as well. First one, relaying information before, in between shots, what, when, and how. So obviously this is important. This is, a lot of the heart of communication, certainly from a brusher standpoint. And, I think it's, the name of the game here is just there needs to be constant learning taking place, picking up on conditions, changing conditions, so many factors involved, right? And so important to, get as much information as you possibly can throughout the game, throughout the practice, and event as a whole. It also comes down to also knowing your teammates, and this is probably where teams that have played together for a while have a bit of an advantage. Get to know each other, your tendencies, the personalities, and what works, what dialogue works for some people and maybe not for others. And really at the end of the day, how best to help each other succeed, but also continuing to gather information or confirm or reconfirm information as you go. So next point, shot discussion and making shot discussion routine. So this goes a little bit back to knowing the game. Again, yeah, best brushers on the elite teams nowadays, they are kind of calling the game from the other end. Shots to some degree for sure, icing, definitely. They're being proactive, almost, expecting this, and then seeing if it happens, getting ready to know kind of what the speeds are, for instance, or what the line may do, things along those lines, getting ready to pass information on if that needs to happen, for instance. So it just basically leads to a more efficient information share, better learning of the game, obviously for the brushers, and obviously better learning of the conditions as you're into the game. Helps everyone be on the same page as well. And when you're not, there can be some discussion to get on the same page, which is important. Certainly the brushers can be a big help to the back end as well, whether it be, again, just through information and best guesses at weight or educated guesses at weight and line, things of that nature. And you've heard me say this a few times, but being proactive, instead of reactive. So knowing kind of what the shot is, why you're playing that, and what kind of the good options or outcome are at the other end, basically. So next point, disagreeing and stepping in versus letting it go. Kind of an interesting one. Certainly this falls right into the art of brushing. There's no doubt about that, as there's no book on this whatsoever. But this can be a difficult one, but I think a good problem to have if you think of it that way, just because it probably means everyone's engaged, right? And taking things serious. So I guess first, have these discussions as a team, right? Find out what everyone's okay with. And I guess second, my opinion on this was always a bit of common sense has to prevail here. So, I'll give you an example. I mean, if you have a skip that's playing lights out and they seem to be just in tune with everything, and things are going really well, that's a case where you might step aside and kind of give them a little more freedom, and maybe there's a shot that comes up that a brusher may not 100% agree with, but you kind of got to read your players a little bit that way. Conversely, if somebody's struggling, a back end player is struggling, and maybe that's where a little more information is helpful and possibly even welcomed at that point, right? So I think, again, a common sense approach, I think it's a good discussion to have. I think a lot of teams don't have it, and I think at the end of the day, it really does go back to setting the precedent of the fact that you're kind of all in it to not only help each other out, but for the betterment of the team as a whole, right? So again, use common sense when it comes to these things. So next point, relaying information during your shot. So again, right at the heart of communication, obviously, brushers are I would say, responsible for weight first. But you can also, like we've mentioned, you can also tell a bit on or have some information online, at least until confirmed or told otherwise. But again, trying to manage in a sense of the information, and in some cases what you see or may see better as well, given your position. So inter-brusher communication and relay, really important. I think there's several points throughout a shot that you want to be relaying, obviously, information to the line caller, broom holder, and I think you want this, in my opinion, you want this consistent. You want certain spots throughout a shot where your skip is knows basically they're going to get some information from you. It might be the same information all the way through the shot. Totally fine. It may change as the shot goes down, or travels based on either changing condition or fine tuning kind of the initial judgment or read of the throw. Totally fine as well. And that's even a better reason to carry on with the talking. But you want those interactions as much as possible consistent, but also short and efficient as well, because the more verbal talking, I think the more chance then that a call can be missed because you can't get it in word wise, or potentially taking a little bit of concentration away from whether it be anticipating the line or things like that as well. So yes, you want communication, but I think you want it consistent and just very efficient as you go. And I think the big thing here is the skip really shouldn't have to ask for information, right? That should be coming. They should know when it's coming, and you want to keep that as consistent as possible throughout, and that will definitely help on the efficiency, and I'll just allow everyone to kind of better do their job, basically, with respect to the stuff that you need to concentrate on to make things successful during the shot. Okay, to the other end for discussion, when and how many. So obviously happens. You see this lots, not uncommon whatsoever. Multiple ways to do this, right? Maybe no right or wrong. I think that, maybe doesn't happen enough in maybe not the elite teams, but younger teams. Maybe doesn't happen enough that the brusher goes down just on occasion to get a better look or vantage point of the house. I think a closer look when it's say a precise shot, or there's very small margin or difference between a really good shot and one that all of a sudden isn't so good, whether it be you've set up a double or an angle or something like that, right? So I think important in some occasions for a brusher to have a really good look at that, exactly where you want that and where it has to be, and kind of, why as much as possible as well. So, I think that's a good thing, and needs to happen probably more. I think when we talk about that scenario, it doesn't even have to be both brushers, but certainly you want the inside or kind of lead brusher that's going to be managing that, knowing exactly what's going on there for sure. You might have a situation where it's a quick strategy discussion too, and that might be a situation where you have, one of your brushers that heads down as well, just to, get in on it a little bit, give a point of view. Maybe it's, maybe they have some pertinent information as well about a path or weight, or not knowing it as well, which may make the decision easier. And then often I think, we see longer meetings or longer discussions. Maybe it's a situation that, you're deciding whether to go all in, late in the game or not, or what have you. Or just a really difficult situation, right? In which case you'll probably have both brushers down as well. Those don't happen very often, and they can't from a time perspective, but those are cases that likely everyone on board down at the other end is probably a good thing as well. Okay, last one on communication, throwing in perspectives. So I put this one in here. It's interesting. I know as for you skips out there, people that have skipped and maybe played front end or swept in the past, you'll know that you often have a different perspective when you're standing down at the other end, and sometimes that almost gives you an easier look at things, whether it just be that it's at a distance and all in front of you, or you're just seeing it from the throwing end. But it's interesting for sure. So the brushers being down there obviously have a second look at lines and weights, a valuable look and that perspective coming from that different end. Shouldn't their minds or discussion with each over kind of the approving of the ice again and shots, again, goes back to just, again, knowing the game, being in the game, kind of, trying to almost call the game from that end, and imagine what the ice is going to be almost as it's being called, or maybe before it's being called as well. And just from the simple fact that they do have a different perspective, which definitely can add to and help the back end at times, and be valuable for sure for teams as well. So are they going to be involved all the time, or can they be? No, definitely. And there's going to be lots of shots that are simple and straightforward, and obviously the brushers don't need to be thinking about with more simple ends and just different things like that. But certainly I think, again, it goes back to the practice of knowing the game from that end, and basically, in a sense, skipping the game from that end as well. Okay, so our next topic, learning the field of play. So some points under this as well. First one, we'll discuss learning general club and or arena ice tendencies. So, I think all the things that we talk about today, as you become more proficient as a brusher in those, then the easier it becomes to start banking your experience and basically learning these tendencies, whether it be in your home club or a club ice in general, or when you have the opportunity or are playing on arena ice surfaces. I'll be the first to tell you, I mean, there's lots to learn, and you never stop learning. It doesn't matter how much experience you have. It's amazing how, there can still be little new things or little new nuances. But that being said, there are lots of things that are consistent from arena to arena, from club to club, or, even some crossover as well. So yeah, I think it's just, again, about becoming proficient in some of these things, and that allows you better to see and understand, when these tendencies are happening, and then you can put them into the experience or memory bank, so that the next time, you have a better guess on that, or a much more educated guess, or see these things actually happened again. And leading to less uncertainty, leading to more shots being made. Simple as that, right? So, okay, ice that you have to keep the rock moving versus ice that you have to wait and then finish. So, I think this is a good one too. I certainly have, and I'm hoping that we've all kind of experienced this, where you've played on ice that, man, it seems like you've got to keep that rock moving, or you just can't get it to where you want. And then you might play on some ice where, well, you've got to be careful not to overbrush it. You can almost, wait until, the very last moment, and then finish it off to allow it to get there, and not overbrush. And the funny thing is, sometimes those surfaces, may time very similar if you're a team that's timing things and whatnot. And it's really interesting that, it's just that feel, that maybe that finishing glide that's different. But I think it's being cognizant of this and picking up on those things as a brusher. That's going to change your approach. This, of course, may change as the game goes on, or an event, or from draw to draw as well, right? So keep an open mind on that. But just a little nuance, again, that helps you kind of approach how you want to be brushing, and how you can brush to kind of get the most, again, out of every shot, basically. And you find this, with so many draws to the button for hammer nowadays too, really is noticeable. With that, obviously early in a game as well, but throughout a game, something to be cognizant of. Okay, learning from your shots, and we've mentioned this a little bit already. Practice and game, really important for brushers and throwers, but brushers as well, to learn, confirm, or make sense of your team shots, from first rock in practice to last rock after the game. So, and I've said this a lot, we go out there in our pregame practice, and then that first shot is an opportunity to learn right away, right? Because that could be, a big shot in the second end of the game that's on a fresh path. That might be your speed, for instance, right? So, take those opportunities to learn as much as you possibly can. And that shouldn't change kind of throughout the game. Again, common sense says that we're trying to, put our best throw on every shot. And a lot of that comes from, having our best, guess, if you will, best educated guess at what that weight needs to be, especially when we're talking draws, or lighter weight hits, right? So, yeah, never stop learning on that. I think it's basically you when you have these constant communications throughout the game between players, it enhances that positive discussion, kind of reinforcement, and like I said, better educated guesses going forward. Okay, next point here under learning field of play, learning from opposition shots. So equally as important, no question. In fact, you might have more opportunity to learn. In some cases, you have more opportunity to learn from opposition shots, as you can give more attention to information gathering, in a sense, when you're not the one trying to make your shot. So take these opportunities as well, definitely of speeds, but also lines, and have someone or both brushers kind of put that away in the memory bank as well for a shot, whether it be right after theirs or later on in the game. most times there's you've got a lot of coverage throughout the sheet throughout a game, and it's just a matter of knowing what that was and knowing maybe how it may have changed or not, but that information really is there oftentimes to figure out, right? So okay. So a little bit of discussion around timing, and we'll get to just some different things. Obviously, there's different ways with timing, ways to do it, lots of different techniques and things like that, from not timing at all to different methods of and who's doing it and why, which is our first point here. So the first thing I will say, I think that inaccurate timing is probably worse than no timing at all. So it really is a skill. You've got to practice it. You've got to be good at it and get good at it, obviously, if you're doing that, right? And then, who's doing that and what are you getting out of it? And we'll talk a little more about this in different points ahead here. But, is it one brusher? Is it both brushers? Is it all hands on deck, right? Is it both brushers, and are you having the skip do something as well? So, again, I think we're seeing probably every combination and permutation of this, that we see from different teams doing. Some things to consider, for hits, and you see a lot of people that, may want to confirm times on hits, probably from a hog to hog time, for instance, just so they know, are you in the ballpark? Maybe that's why it didn't finish as much or not. Is the skip the one to be doing that? Is that something that person can see well enough, kind of exactly the far hog line, and not lose concentration by watching that on the actual throw, for instance? Is that something that a far sweeper, the second sweeper, can do on hits, because they're not really, maybe they're not in your strategy sweeping anyway, right? Maybe that's something they can do, and really doesn't then hamper the skip in trying to get that as well, right? So some things to think about there. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go, as well. So common sense when timing, next point. This really all I mean by this, not to extend the point at all, but basically, if it doesn't make sense, maybe there was a mistake made, right? So I mean, that's just using common sense to not, be misinformed, if you will. There are, especially later in games, oftentimes you'll have little smudges or little picks or things like that happened, between the hog lines, for instance, especially, I guess, would be the most common issue, I guess, if you're doing hog to hog, right? Whether it be your shot or an opposition shot, for instance, and the time doesn't make sense. So just, take those into account, throw things out that just don't make sense, obviously, because little mistakes will happen when you're timing. There's no, it doesn't matter how good you are at that, right? So, or things that are out of your control, like little picks, for instance, that can throw a person off. So just be aware of that more than anything. So types of times and usefulness. So obviously, you've got different times or timing systems that you can use. There are split times, whether it be backline to hog or T-line to hog. Definitely can provide a brusher with kind of some quick information about the weight, which happens kind of or is given or shown immediately after the release, basically. So I guess the one thing here, and again, can be good information. Lots of teams use it. And if you're good at it, whether it has to be both sweepers or maybe it's just one brusher that really, is dialed in on this, and that's the person that typically will get these, right, just as a guide. But make sure it's that. Make sure it is as a guide. Certainly, this isn't the speed of the rock, and so the release, that can change dramatically with inconsistent releases, put it that way. Whether that's an add or a subtractive weight or things along those lines. Oftentimes we may have a person that releases the same way, and you get used to that based on the split. But with inconsistent releases, again, you can't lose the kind of the art of watching that and judging, and in some cases kind of throwing the watch out as well, and taking the rock from there. The other thing too is, don't forget, you need that judgment piece and the visual as well, because further down the ice, when you're still judging, there's no time to help you at that point as well. So hog to hogs we've also talked a little bit about, and then they can be useful for hits. You can get information from opposition draws. You can get them from your draws too. Again, a little more difficult for the brushers to do that, I would say, as they should be kind of, managing the shot and have a lot going on with respect to a draw. Skip can do that too. Not easy for them either, though, given the level of concentration needed to read the release and manage the shot as it gets, certainly to the near hog line to them as well. So can be challenging. Just make sure that those jobs are being done well first. Certainly, though, an opportunity to get hog to hog times from your opposition, right? And that can be valuable information as well. And then, like we had mentioned, judging from eye, you can't lose that. That's still very, very important. And just a skill that you'll need, whether on release or further down with the travel of the stone as well. And then there's still teams, great teams in the past, and still teams that may not use much in the way of timing. They may put the brush down and give a general sense of the weight, but kind of throw the weight basically to make the shot as well. And multiple ways this works. If you get good at that, it's pretty darn effective as well. So it just again comes down to, though, a bit of the art and the feel. It always comes back to that, even with time as a guide. So the conversion of times, so if necessary, again, but for those that would, rather say, and I'm one of those people, but you may have a teammate or a team or whatnot that, they don't want to hear a time. They're not going to go off of a time for the feel as a thrower. They may want to hear, that it's draw to the button speed or normal or a distance. It's 2 feet heavier here, it's 3 feet keener here than it was an end ago, whatever the case may be, right? So so basically, as a brusher, if you're getting information, you need to be able to convert those times, and I think it really is as simple as, you need to know the hog to hog to a split to kind of a distance or weight comparison, and basically be pretty inept at moving things along that continuum, which with some practice becomes pretty easy to do. Just knowing kind of what the times are in relation to where a rock stops, for instance, right? So, and it's just a matter of kind of doing those conversions, getting good at it, being quick at it. And again, ultimately, part of your job is to, give your teammate the information to make them at their best as well, or give them their best chance as well. So often just more than anything, a little bit of practice and discussion. This is something where the brushers can really help each other out with as well. Okay, last one on timing, opposition shot learning as it relates to time. So, obviously taking splits for the opposition shots can be really difficult and really tough to know. I mean, nice to know if you're using split times, nice to know your own team's tendencies in that sense, and what the times can or should be for different conditions, basically for your teammates. gets a little more daunting to know everyone you play against as well, right? So that's where a lot of times hog to hog times, if you're doing some timing on the opposition shots, can be useful. But I think, often we forget this next point, and that's just remember when you're taking that information, remember to compare apples to apples, as it were. So what I mean by that is, give an example, probably best way to explain that. Opposition is throwing out wide. They got a fresh path, and you want some information on it as well, because just in case you have to go out there too. So, they're calling for T line, the draw is thrown, you get a hog to hog, but it stops as a halfway guard. So really that's useless information if you think about it, unless you know a hog to hog time in a different path where the rock stopped in roughly that same area. So that's what I mean by comparing, shots that are similar as far as the depth is concerned, so that you actually have some information on that time then, right? You can figure out then, well, it's this much heavier here, and do those conversions then as well. So just remember that. I think that that can be misleading for some people, and you really need to do similar comparisons to make that information useful for you from opposition shots. The other thing too that I think, with opposition shots that can be really beneficial and important is doing the eye judgment as well, and in some cases walking along with the shot and not only seeing, or judging the release, but also seeing how, is the weight coming off? Is it sliding well kind of throughout its path too? And again, you'll see kind of elite teams and elite brushers doing this from time to time when they really want some information or expect to be throwing there, at some point later in the game or end or even the next shot, for instance, things of that nature, right? So important points there as well. Okay. So last heading here under physical management, and just again briefly with this, but first point here, brushing partner routines. So this you want laid out, obviously. Basically this is as simple as listing the jobs and making sure you're covering them off for consistency, and to ensure everything's done between kind of the brushing partners, whether it be the front end or when the third is part of that system as well. But just knowing who's responsible for what, making sure that gets done, the little jobs, whether it be cleaning the path or things like that. Maybe there's a specific person that watches the time in timed events, and so on and so forth, right? But also incorporating a lot of the communication, shot discussion, and things like that we've talked about, that make you just that much better as brushers as well. And team brushing strategy, when to brush. So this would be along the lines of are you brushing kind of early on shots or late or the whole way, and just looking for or having a strategy for what the efficiencies are there as well. Can you be as effective, with more pressure and less speed, for instance, early, and save yourself a little bit over a long event, and finishing shots off, or adding speed kind of later in a rock's travel, for instance, and just little things like that, but having a bit of a plan that over a long event can make a difference. And then a team brushing strategy, how to brush as well. So are you using one sweeper or two, or just one on hits, for instance, and just, again, things like that, but looking for little ways that you can be as effective and physically kind of more efficient as well. And I would throw in, your strategy on, if you're trying to make rocks curl, and when are you doing that, and when are you not doing that because of the weight, and things like that, but just all things to think about that can help save the brushers. And then the last one, just off ice, and simply just, again, being proactive with, the training that you want to do or need to do, as well as treatment. I think the necessary treatment, self-management, so that tightness or injury or things along those lines don't come into the picture, that they don't affect not only your brushing but also your throwing, because it's similar to throwing. Brushing is very asymmetric for the most part, and repetitive, and those two things together, and physical as well, and so those things together are the factors in which injury can happen, basically. So it's just a matter of being, again, proactive with that side of it, and trying to stay a step ahead, if you will, not only on your training but any necessary treatment and warm up and stretching and so on and so forth as well. So just keeping that kind of at front of mind, just so you can do all these things we've discussed about today without any limitations, basically. Okay, so hope that was some information for you. Like I say, happy to discuss further. If there's any questions, if there's any comments at all, feel free to reach out. Love talking about this kind of stuff, so don't hesitate on that at all. But otherwise, yeah, have a good season. For those of you still curling and or in play downs, best of luck, and hope to see you all and chat with you soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.